Hi, I'm Christopher Gronski with DestinationFreedom.org. I want to talk a little bit about jury instruction, or I would say qualifying for a juror, things like that. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about juries, and that's one thing. And if you're a freedom person, you should never be trying to get out of jury duty. You should always be pursuing being on a jury because there's no one more important than you than being on a jury, okay? Because the idea of the jury based on common law was the idea that the people would protect each other from government. Now, if you look in the history of uh, of selecting juries, the crown typically would select juries because it's much nicer to compel the people to convict each other. That takes the king out of the picture, so that it's it's the people, treating each other that way. That was the political purpose of selecting these juries. And the thing is, the crown historically, and you can just look this up, would typically sequester the jury, in essence put them into prison until they got the the results they were looking for, which is bad. Um, in a free society, the idea of selecting jurors is a duty that the people have to protect um, each other from an overreaching government and certainly overreaching judiciary. Now, judges in these courts, they um, they want to tell the juries many times that they will tell the jury what the law is, and that the jurors are required to rule in a certain way based upon what the law says. That is pure government propaganda, okay? And so, what I'm going to tell you, maybe a judge won't tell you. And I'll just say, for the people's sake, when you go into being selected for a jury, you keep your mouth shut. You're not there to uh, in essence, during the trial or even beforehand, talk about anything about the concept of jury nullification. The jury nullification means that the jury has the power to judge the case and the law, both. And the standard by which the jury is to govern each member of the jury is to govern itself is the conscience of the juror. Whether a judge says so or not, that still is the standard. Now, that being said, I think there's been cases where a judge would look at maybe what's happened in the courtroom, and maybe the jury wouldn't give the judge the outcome he's looking for. The judge may move for mistrial in some capacity. Those things happen. Many times these judicial branches are very corrupt. Regardless, you're still there to judge the case and the law. If you feel the law is overreaching or unjust or immoral, then you can find and acquit the defendant, or whoever the defendant, and protect them from this overreaching law, or or what have you, regardless of whether the defendant is guilty of the law or whatever it is, even if even if it's clear that the law, in as it is finds the defendant guilty of whatever the subject matter is. The jury has that power. One juror can acquit, because it has to be unanimous. And so, if I would recommend, if you want to see the power of one juror, is watch the film 12 Angry Men, with, I believe it's Henry Fonda's in there, I believe. I don't think it's Jimmy Stewart. I believe it's Henry Fonda. There's some other big names in that old film, 12 Angry Men. So, if you're freedom minded, you definitely want to be on a jury so that you can make sure that government is at bay. The jury, a fully informed juror, is making sure that we have the end game taken care of. There are two areas of governmental protection, if you will, and that is the sheriff and the jury. So this is not a small thing. It's a huge thing to make sure that you get on a jury. Don't try to avoid that duty. You never know. Someday you may find yourself needing the support of a jury. So you should, if you're going to look up concepts, and look up the concept of jury nullification. And one of the best places to look up is a website called FIJA. I believe it's org. It could be .com, but I believe it's .org. But it's FIJA, Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA. And look that up. And there's a lot of resources there for you to understand what you need to do. Now, the thing about jury selection is it's a bad place to be trying to educate the jury at the courthouse, because typically the judge or someone is going to be determining that you're trying to tamper with this particular case or whatever it is, and they're going to pull you out of there or whatever. It's not the best place to do that. Wherever you find in your state the jury pool is being selected from, and typically it's two areas or both, and that is the driver's license lists, and the other is the voter registration. So that's where you want to be educating people on how to be a great juror that is going to secure rights and nothing else. Okay. So again, it's my intent to encourage you to endeavor to be on jury if you're freedom-minded, because you're judging the case and the law, the facts of the case and the law. If you determine that the law is unjust or immoral, then you might have a moral obligation to not convict based upon the immorality of that particular law, whatever it may be. I remember there was a time, it might have been in one of the southern states, could have been Mississippi, Alabama, I'm not sure, but they were trying to convict someone on a cannabis charge of some sort, and every time the jury would acquit because there was someone on the jury that said this should not be illegal, and they could not convene a jury to convict this person. That's how laws are changed, when the jury will not enforce these unjust laws. This is really, really important. And regardless of what jurisdiction that they're convening a jury for, could be a federal court, it could be a state court. Now, that being said, I want to mention with respect to state citizens, typically when you're being asked from the jury questionnaire, are you a United States citizen, you cannot answer that question without more information. You must reach out to the court, and not verbally, because you're not looking for just an answer in your ears. You're looking for the court to write to you what is the answer to your question, and that is, what is the definition of the term United States in the jury questionnaire question concerning, are you a United States citizen? If they determine that that is the District of Columbia, then of course the answer is no. And that may disqualify you from being on a jury. So you must find out whether that's the definition of that term. You might be saying, how does the state of New Hampshire, like it's our state, or some other state, the state that you're in, how does that state define the term United States in this context? And if you look up the Hooven-Evat versus Allison, or maybe Hooven-Allison versus Evat, I may be transposing that in my head. But anyway, the Hooven case, 1945, it defines the term United States to have three separate and distinct meanings. So you have to know what the definition of that term United States is. Don't be quick to say, no, you're not a United States citizen, because I just want you to know I am a United States citizen and I'm not a United States citizen. Both those are true. It depends on the definition of that term United States. So with respect to a state citizen, you definitely want to determine whether you qualify to be on a jury. Now, let's say the court determines it by the District of Columbia, or let's say you, based upon what the court responds, determine that you are not a United States citizen in that context. then immediately you should reach out to your state rep and say that the court has violated your duty. Because if you have a birth certificate or a certificate of naturalization in America and you are a citizen of one of the states, you're not in DC or Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. If you're a citizen of one of the states, that means you have a driver's license from that state, then you have a duty to be on a jury. And so if the court is keeping you from being on the jury because you're saying you're not a United States citizen or a 14th Amendment citizen, then the state needs to step up and determine that the court is violating your duty to be on that jury. And I know I've been there before. In New Hampshire, the court defines United States citizen as a 14th Amendment citizen. So of course that disqualifies me to be on a jury. But I have a duty to be on a jury, and the court violated my duty. And so I don't know that the state of New Hampshire is determining the 14th Amendment as what qualifies on a jury, because before there was a 14th Amendment, there was New Hampshire, and it had jurors. And so obviously before there was a 14th Amendment federal citizen, there were citizens of this state, and they had the duty to be on a jury. So I wanted to mention that to you. So determine whether you're a United States citizen in the context of being on a jury. All right, that's what I want to talk a little bit about. Jury education or jury nullification. Be sure to, if you want more information, be sure to go to DestinationFreedom.org. And if you want to email us at statecitizen@DestinationFreedom.org.